Morning or afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Once again, my name is Doug. I'm going to be walking you through the material today. And today's going to be all about licensing, talking about how to maximize the value of licensing and kind of getting into some details, thoughts, and considerations of who actually needs a paid seat and who doesn't. So we've kind of put up in jest for anybody who's a Star Wars fan, we have Darth Sidious there scheming, of course, about paying for licensing that you don't use, which is a constant battle for every single organization, including ours. We deal with it. We use other software products and pay for licensing, and there's always a roundup, something to look at closely. So with that in mind, we are in the business of providing seats and content for millions of well, not millions, but thousands of organizations around the planet, millions of users. And so we want you to be able to take a look at and understand, how to maximize the value of all that. So we're going to be covering a couple of different areas. We're going to walk through a couple of pieces of slide deck, give a little background to FileCloud. If you've never heard of us before, we'll only spend a few minutes on that, and then we're going to get right into our product, but also things to keep out for, keeping some terminology to look out for within the industry as a whole. So basically file sharing, anything that results in sharing of files and maintaining the security around those files. So we're going to walk through how to determine who needs a paid seat, because there's some degrees to look at to decide who actually needs a paid seat. What are they doing with those files? Different access levels, paid seat, basically a full access license versus a free guest. Usually in the industry, there's a lot of free accounts. We'll walk through specific to FileCloud, but know that a lot of terminology applies here, when you're looking at other areas as well. And we're also going to be looking at those different users and the impacts on licensing and avoiding gotchas, things to be aware of in case everything looks great, you're ready to get started, but these are I'm going to provide a couple good questions for you to ask just to be sure there's no last minute smoke and mirrors, to make sure that all is clear. You aren't going to get a surprise bill at the end of the day. So we'll walk through that here in just a few minutes. So anyways, let's hop into it. Just a quick background on us. We're not going to walk into an entire walkthrough of FileCloud history. We just want you to know everything that you are going to see today it's battle hardened. We are not brand new. We've been around the code base has been around for 10 years, product's about 8 years. So everything is stable, reliable, and rock solid. And that's an important thing to look at and consider when working with any organization, any software product. Typically, the first 2 to 3 years of development are going to be problematic. There's going to be bugs. It's kind of just inevitable. It's almost like physics in anytime you're in development of software. Know that we work with some large organizations, so everything I'm going to be sharing with you is amassed from conversations that I've had over my lifetime, but also with some large organizations, small organizations, organizations that fall under the Department of Defense, supply chain, ITAR, HIPAA, FINRA, all types of regulations and environments that we talk with, both maybe just 4 or 5 people in size, all the way up to tens of thousands. We're kind of amassing some questions and considerations that we get from all of that. And know that, of course, if you end up working with us, our support team is flat. Go check us out on the Gartner Peer Insights peer review. And when I say our support team is flat, I mean that the support team is not structured so that you have to call in and talk to a level 1, 2, 3, 4 person. It's first person you talk with will be able to resolve things quickly and accurately, which is important. You don't have to spend 4 or 5 days just getting to the right person, which is enormously frustrating. So let's jump into it. Let's get into the product here and kind of talk through a couple different considerations. And I'll keep this up in the background so that we can revisit. Okay, excellent. So how to determine who needs a paid seat. So and it's not just as simple as jumping onto Active Directory, taking a look and seeing, okay, it looks like everybody needs We have this many users. Okay, well, first of all, a couple considerations. Is this an ITAR compliant environment? Is this a specially regulated environment? That's number one. And you may look at the amount of business that your organization does within that regulated environment. There may be a subset of users that need to work within that environment. Okay, so once you've identified those set of users, that need that environment. What exactly is a paid user? What exactly are they able to do? Well, first of all, within FileCloud, they're going to have 3 different means of access. Generally, what that means is they can log in through the web browser, what we're seeing here. They can also invite others externally, so they can invite somebody into the system. They're going to have access to our iPhone client or Android. We have a dedicated mobile application, so they can access files anytime, and they can also work within the Drive client. So this is something to keep in mind when you are considering what a paid seat means. Usually it's level of access. I can quickly get at my team folders. I'm just given a username and log in, some basic credentials, kind of depending how you work that. Maybe you have an SSO platform that you use, but everything's integrated. They can get on, they can access their files through any means. And of course, this changes if you're, for example, in an ITAR compliant environment. That's going to change, of course, to which we would recommend taking a look at only using or including a handful of people for that. Typically, those that are sharing or working with files consistently that need to be inviting others to share end products, deliverables, contracts, what have you. So it's typically only going to be a handful of people that actually need a full license there. We'll kind of get into some differences here. But know that I can access everything through a variety of means. I can have access to any network or team folders that we may have set up. That's what allows a full access user to, really those are the means there. So let's log in here for a second. I want to show you a couple things internal users typically can do kind of across the board here. If I jump into, for example, let's go to my team folder, and we're going to use this sample documents folder. An internal user, a paid seat, can share something. So I'm able, in this case with FileCloud, I'm able to share by right-clicking, share. I can do this from the mobile phone app. I can do this from my Drive client on my computer. And when we do that, we're going to generate a sharing link. This is going to allow me to share to somebody outside the company. I like to think of this as, I think of FileCloud as my house. This is my home. And I'm, as part of a family member here, I'm allowed to invite somebody in, and we have seats at a table. Now with FileCloud, we can invite an unlimited number of external users. And we're going to get into what that looks like for the external user side here. So we are not tied, and this is something to make note of. For our business model, we're not tied to any ratio of paid seats versus free seats. So somebody that has a free seat are invited into the system. Those with a paid seat, they're added. Typically, they're onboarded, part of the initial onboarding process. They're just going to be in. We don't have any ratios. Pay attention that when you're looking around at different products, when you are inviting or working with people, ask questions. Ask, is there a ratio of number of external users? If I need to share this externally, can we denote that by email? Does it have to be a public link? Can we make that a private link? Can we create a username password for them? Is there a ratio of usernames or number of external or free accounts? And there's a variety of terminology. The industry is rife with terminology, various terminology. So can I, is there a ratio of paid seats to free seats? So in our business model, we don't care. You can invite 10,000 external users and have 5 internal users, to kind of give an extreme example. And when we're doing that, we're going to just set the specification that we're allowing specific users. We denote this via email, so this assumes that we're inviting them via email, that the email is trusted, meaning that we haven't, for example, blacklisted it. Maybe we've set up a whitelist grouping, whatever it may be. So then we can set the permissions. Do we want them to be able to view, download, and upload? all through the browser. External users, the free accounts, they won't be able to reshare things. So we want to keep you in control of what you're sharing. They won't be able to invite others into the system. They won't be able to wander around outside the parameters that you've given them. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and generate this, share it out. Internal users can see all kinds of activity, all types of things taking place in the system, but that's enough of that. Let's log out of my internal user and let's hop in as the external. So right now we're logging in as a free account. Use this Hotmail here. And we're going to see same type of interface here. Once again, I can download, I can upload, I can work within the browser, but I'm limited to the browser. So in our accounts, we are limited to browsers. So let's say, for example, if I want to take this test document here, I got a couple different documents in there. Oh, it looks like I didn't give myself permission. So to create or rather to upload within here. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go into something that I do have permissions for. Let's check for that. Here we go, file tagging. Okay, great. So now I'm going to drag and drop. This is going to process and upload the folder and the contents of that folder. So great. So I can upload, I can download, I can work within this, and all of this, of course, is being logged and it's all audited. So, the free accounts can work with you within the browser. I can only see and search documents that apply to me. So things to keep in mind with free accounts. This is more or less kind of a good guideline within the industry on a whole. But once again, I'm speaking to FileCloud, but generally speaking, when you add different accounts, usually it's browser based. It's typically browser based. It's kind of a good rule of thumb here to keep in mind. So now, once we're working back and forth here, I want to pull up a couple other things to be mindful of. So when we have our different account types, and the industry is rife with this terminology, there's a lot of different types of terms. We call it full access. I'll discuss guest access, but basically in our case, full and guest are basically the same thing, minus it's just a matter of do you want to give them 5-10 gigabytes of personal storage to place their own files. But they have full functionality within FileCloud. It's just a matter of, hey, do I want to give them 5 gigs of personal folder that they can do whatever in? It doesn't need to be structured. It's just their personal blob space, whatever you want to call it. Or are we just going to limit them to the team folders that the admin set up or network shares, what have you. So but basically we have paid seats and limited access, basically the free accounts, the accounts that we can invite people. Limited access accounts, something to keep in mind here is, and this is where kind of an interesting space. So what's happening here is, so we can access these limited access accounts by browser, via browser. In FileCloud, we do not limit the free accounts by email domain. So for example, if I'm Doug Tuff at codelathe.com, I'm not restricted to only placing, full access accounts, and we're looking at the administrative side here. And anybody in green here has a paid seat, essentially. When I'm looking at these paid seats, they're not limited to one domain. You could add multiple domains. Say you had a contractor that you had hired on and you want to be working in here. You can simply upgrade that contractor very easily. Just switch the status on them. At FileCloud, we are ridiculously simple. We're kind of a breath of fresh air. I worked in consulting before in a previous life, and we're extremely simple from the fact that our licensing, we just care about the total number of seats in the system. And if you're on our cloud, there's a storage component to it. How much storage do you get for the whole group? But beyond that, that's it. We only care about the number of licenses. We're very straightforward there. So as long as we're not exceeding that set number, we're good to go. You can swap people around in there all you want to your heart's content, just as long as it doesn't exceed the top number. And we can always add people, one at a time if needed. That's not a big deal. So, but basically we can add limited access users to our full access list. We can upgrade them if needed, but also as when we're looking at the users and what they're accessing, you may have a subset of users who truly need full access. They need the desktop client, they need their mobile, they need access through their phone, they need to share externally. But if you have somebody, just make up a position here, but somebody in accounting that checks, I don't know, purchase orders once every 3 months, you can set them up with a limited access account. You can set them up with a free account, and just add them to that specific folder. And if they're okay with logging in through the browser, previewing through the browser, viewing or working within the browser, and if they have the ability, or if you're using like Microsoft 365, I can open this in Office Online. Then you don't need to pay for a seat. You don't need to necessarily add licensing. So, and here's where I would sign in with my Office 365 subscription, of course. But so once again, just because everybody has an Active Directory account doesn't mean that they necessarily need to use everybody needs full access. Sometimes that's easier, and then later on you go and you comb through, and we can on the administrative side, it's pretty easy to go and set up using our audit log to take a look and see who exactly is using the system and who is not. And we can filter this. It's pretty easy. We could break this down in a variety of ways. We can set up reports so that and alerts based on those reports, but we could set up reports to look at who's actually logging in. This is probably one of the more useful reports that we're looking at within the system. And we can have this emailed to us on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. But once again, if somebody's only logging in once every couple of months, it's likely that they'll be able to accomplish the same things just through the browser. And you can set them up with a free account, save some money. Yeah, so and nobody wants to pay for shelfware. Nobody does well just paying for shelfware, as I'll put it. Shelfware meaning licenses that don't actually get used. We want you using your licenses. we don't want we don't want you irritated and upset that things aren't being used here. So something to keep in mind. I see this frequently. Just because you have 500 users in the system doesn't mean that they all necessarily need the full access. You may have 150 that truly need to be in there. They're in there every day, sharing and working within things constantly. And then there's a few that they're only logging in occasionally, logging in, viewing through the browser. It works great. So perfect. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the paid seat versus the free guest and the different access levels. Something else I wanted to touch on here is to keep in mind when you are looking at user accounts, there's a variety of terminology, and basically what you're looking for, typically full access has multiple means of accessing. It's going to connect directly in with your existing Active Directory or single sign-on. There's going to be integrations available. The external accounts, people that you're inviting into the system, they are typically limited. They're meaning that you can only access through a browser. Their person's going to have to generate a username and password or generate a password with that. But when you're in conversation, be specific and ask if it is tied down to any kind of ratio. If I buy 3 seats, do I get 9 free external accounts? Another thing to be aware of is, can users add themselves as an account, or can I when I import from Active Directory, is it automatically going to add everybody as a paid seat, and then I get a big bill or a true up at some point in the future? So sometimes software is not monitored and you get a surprise bill. I've seen those scenarios come up, and I just speak of that as a generality. It's impossible for that to happen with FileCloud with the way our licensing is structured. Once again, we just have a set seat count. It's very straightforward, and it might be a little bit cumbersome when you need to add users, but we would rather you specifically add users than to get a surprise bill and come in irritated later. What the heck is this? And then we have to sort it all out. And then now you distrust the system. What's going to happen next, right? There's an unknown factor. People and businesses, as a general rule of thumb, do very well when things are stable and predictable. That's what our licensing model is aimed at. But keep in mind, when you're talking to different vendors, keep an eye open and be aware of how can this license information or license count or usage increase. Something else to keep in mind here, we want to talk a little bit about gotchas. And there are quite a number of them lingering in the industry on whole. So something else, and a lot of this deals with licensing. Some gotchas, let me give some examples here. Can I have more than one device connected to it? Personally, I have a laptop, I have a cell phone, and I have an iPad that my kids end up using more than I do. But I have all three. Can I have all three of those? Maybe you have somebody who has a personal and a work phone, and they end up kind of doing a mixture. Maybe they're in the field a lot, and they have you have company provided iPads for documenting work or pictures or whatnot. Maybe you're scanning things in. We're converting that from that image to text. So a lot of different things, but can you have more than one device attached to the system or for a login? So, here, if I go into Doug, let's take a look here. And over the time, I've I have a Mac, I have a PC, and I have multiple Drive and Sync clients installed. So there's a lot. Know that this is not special because I am an employee. Anybody that has any paid product of FileCloud could do the exact same thing, even just with the basic standard edition. But keep in mind, this is something to ask, can you have more than one license? Another gotcha, is something to be aware of, is within folders and storage of documents, can you have over X number of gigabytes? If I wanted to upload a 100 gigabyte file, is that going to be a problem? Or do I need to upgrade plans? Is there anything there? Another gotcha that I've run into, do I have administrative access? Meaning, can I log in as an admin and overview all activity? So you may see an inexpensive price. However, you don't have admin access, which I've experienced this myself very recently. You don't have access over the administrative abilities of your system. So now you've added users, you've added people, but you don't have administrative access. So, is this an add-on? It's usually good to ask if a product is modular and what are the considerations for different licensing scenarios. And typically, the longer the explanation, the more complex or involved it is, the more of a headache that generally leads to over time. So, it's fairly typical within the industry, something to keep aware of and mindful of. Couple other things to be aware of. Is there any, for another example here, we provide API calls, and this is something else that we run into. If I do a quick search of our documentation, so we can basically anything that I am clicking within FileCloud, within the product on the web, within the web browser here, this can all be done through API calls. When we're doing that, some places, some sites will, they have a limit to how many API calls you can do. These API calls, and this is typically more advanced if you are automating some work, or maybe you're creating a new front end and working through that. Are there limits to API calls? We don't have any API calls or API call limitations, something to keep in mind. If you are going down that route, something to keep in mind there. The other area to be mindful of is going to be, and this is fairly typical, but there's a governance aspect to many file sharing platforms. So when we're looking at how we govern the data that's being sent out, for example, I may have a folder here that when I upload a document and it contains a social security number, I can no longer share that document out because it contains a social security number. We do that through some scanning and automation on our back end. These are all things that you can configure and set up, but something to be mindful of in licensing, does that cost more money? What does that cost? What is that impact over the number of users? So all things to be mindful of. At FileCloud, we only have two different options. We have a standard edition and a enterprise edition. Enterprise typically falls under this data governance area here. So when we set up retention policies, classification, if we use FIPS 140, if we need to plug in with security information event management, those things fall under, those things are all going to fall under our they're going to fall under our enterprise edition. So all things to keep in mind here. There we go. There's our security information event management. All we're doing here is sharing logs. Couple other gotchas that I've run into. So be aware, is there any limitation for volume, meaning how much data you can transfer over time? And what does the renewal process look like? This is a valuable question to ask. What does the renewal process look like? Am I going to be talking to you, or am I going to be talking to somebody different? Am I talking to a team of people? That may be a bit of a red flag. If you are going to have in a renewal process should, we think it should be very simple. Ours are very straightforward. We send you the bill, same as it was last year, or perhaps maybe there's some inflationary adjustments. Usually it's just a couple percentage points. But if you need to talk to a team of people about your renewal, that may be a bit of a red flag. So something to keep in mind. Also, are you able to download all of your data at once, or are there restrictions there? You don't want to be caught at the last minute, in a pickle where you have to renew and you are unable to download all of your data in time. So all things to be mindful of. Kind of an interesting side note there. FileCloud by nature goes into a read-only mode after the license expiration on the server side. And if you were with us using our online platform and it expired, reach out. We'll work with you to make sure you can get your data. We like to say we are not in the data hostage business. It's your data. We don't have access or able to see or work with any of that, especially in the online platform. So anyways, all things to keep in mind, especially around the gotchas areas, things to ask about the free users versus the external, the external users versus the internal. Are there limitations to the size of files, number of files, number of devices? What are the different packages, or are there different modules? What I'm looking at in the demo may look fantastic and awesome, except you find out that it's 10 times the price that you were originally thought it was going to be, which is always an issue. Anyway, so all things to consider, things that we've run into over time. I've heard on various discussions from, being both with CodeLathe, but also in other organizations as well. So once again, so I'm going to pause for a minute, see if we have any questions. We walked through some gotchas. We kind of talked through the different users, basically paid seats versus the external, free guests that we're inviting into the system. And how to determine who exactly needs a paid seat. What's the impact there? Do they really need a paid seat, or are they just looking at something every once in a while and they're okay, uploading and downloading through the browser? So once again, we don't do well. We don't want you to be, paying for licensing you don't use. That's always a headache and annoying. So anyways, if there's any questions, I'm going to pause for a minute here. I like to try and keep things fairly quick and to the point, but pause here for a minute, see if there's any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I'm unable to, we'll definitely follow up with you. We're tracking all of this, and we'll get you some answers. So I'll pause for a minute, see if any questions come up, and if not, wish everyone a good day. Wish you well, and wish you to stay healthy and employed. That's important, especially these days. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so With that, I wish everyone well, and we're going to be doing a similar webinar, not necessarily on licensing, but same time next week. We'll be doing another webinar walking through FileCloud, going through the basics of onboarding, how to get started, and kind of some things to keep in mind that when you are getting your whole self up and running. So anyways, with that, wish everyone well, and we'll see you next same time next week. Thanks.